Okay. So what I dislike in live uh, gaming, which is um, what I don't like to do as a GM, or I don't like to see as a player in once game launches. I think this is probably pretty universal. Info dumps, exposition, and character introduction, right? These things should all be uh, done in session zero. These things should all be done, whether you're in a club or you're in a Facebook group or you're in a Discord group or the core book. We shouldn't have to discuss a whole lot about Symbaroum if we're all using the core book and we've all made an effort to peruse Symbaroum and understand the world and the setting. And all I have to say is we're going to start in the 10th city of Blackmore, and these are a couple of things you guys should know before game starts. So then when game starts, it's not me as the GM screaming on endless exposition, info dumps, and then the tell us who you are, Joe, tell us who you are, Bill. Okay. You see some of that in actual play videos, I think, because very often GMs are taking into account the audience, which is also a bit of a inaccuracy. Is again, I don't think a lot of tables do this, right? If you do, change it up, because that's boring and it stinks. All right, ask your players to invest outside a session a little bit in the core book or in the lore of the world if it's available. Invest a little bit in conversing among themselves about who their characters are, why they're in this group. And some games demand it. Some games demand that you have connections. Blood and Bone is a fine example of a game that says before session these players should have an affinity for another character or an aversion to another character, and why. Which is cool, right? It assumes the party has been together for some period of time, and there's some allegiance, and there's some just creates a potential role play personality or potential issues in session. But it's hard, right? It's hard not to provide something to kick off a session. Again, I don't see role playing as a spectator sport. I think YouTube, the birth of YouTube, so to speak, and actual play via Google Hangouts, it became a thing. People actually putting up their stuff for whatever reason, whether you're teaching a game system or whether you were trying to put your money where your mouth is. Guys that claim this is how I do a thing, and instead of saying you put something up, and I guess it could prove your point, right? But I've always said that the role playing is a social event. It's something you're supposed to sit down and partake in, not sit and watch or sit and listen. I do think some actual plays are predisposed to being easier to listen to. Watching, on the other hand, unless they are littered with post-production effects and maps and music and fade ins and fade outs, edited actual plays, that could be interesting to watch. Obviously, Critical Role has set a certain example of voice actors, well mic'd, well lit, with some props and things, and of course, a personality, GM personality that really brings an energy and shines. But I've said before, most tables don't resemble. Even groups that have been together for years, if you're a fly on the wall of their cellar dwelling 15th year of AD&D, these guys aren't doing that, right? Most of those guys aren't. That's not their culture of play, right? There might be a few, but I doubt it. Okay, so what does this mean, right? If we're not going to launch a session with the traditional tell us who you are, who are you playing, what you look like, etc., right? Hopefully the players have had that conversation pre-session, while the GM's setting up or whatever, whether it's at home or basement or online. The players have made some effort to try that. If we're doing a campaign, if it's a one-off, let them find out as we play, so to speak. Heck, even in a campaign, right? Depending on how you're going to drop them on their head, there's nothing wrong with characters who haven't necessarily been together, learning who each other is as you play. But the point is, it requires some contextual setup, right? It requires you put them in space. And so, and the reason this subject comes up for me in the last couple of days is I am preparing Savage Worlds for my local group, right? So we're going to pick up and continue our open world white box OSR campaigns. But then the second half, we are devoted to Savage Worlds. And I had prepared to some degree a World War II, occupied France during World War II, Germans in France, kind of a behind the enemy lines spy session, right? I had pre-made a few of the characters. Then it dawned on me, I think it'd be best if we made characters during that session, and that chance for them to learn how to make characters, learn the game as we make the characters, and they get to put their stamp on it. But there was a second hiccup here. None of them are very comfortable with the history that I'm talking about. I think it could be very daunting for them as to how risky is what they do when they're behind enemy lines. What does that look like? It is France, World War II kind of thing. So most likely, I'll probably make it their first experience with Savage Worlds will probably be something a lot more less genre specific and more generalized, just a little sword and sandals, or maybe a sci-fi fantasy, or something that we can generalize and they can readily grasp, and it'd be easy for them to create characters and get into that headspace and try this out, because I think they would really enjoy Savage Worlds. Brian, of course, has heard of it, etc., but everyone else, again, for his local group, is pretty much his old friends, his family, high school buddies going way back kind of thing. And they've always played, I've talked about this before, for the most part, Pathfinder, and then evolving into 5th edition play. And then I would expose them to some stuff. Brian certainly exposed me to a couple of D20 games like Sagaborn, which two individuals left Paizo and they wanted to create a simplified version of the Pathfinder 1st edition. Sagaborn is a little more heroic. Theater of the mind, stripping away the ideas of needing maps and minis, and all of the feats and all that kind of stuff is stripped out of Sagaborn, and very cool elements of Sagaborn. And so Brian introduced me to Sagaborn a few years ago, and I had a chance to play in that with Stephen Harold, and then I had a chance to run a couple of sessions. Very cool. But my point is, Savage Worlds for them, for the most part, is new, completely new. So, but it dawned on me, how if I do say World War II, there's going to be a little more exposition, more info dump to kind of really outline the circumstances they might find themselves in, right? Originally, I had set up the session where the American agent via would actually parachute, in the wee hours of the morning into the area that he would be infiltrating as an undercover Swede, right, in France to do business. But again, that if the dilemma is how do I express this? How the dilemma is understanding, that they are with, they could pull this off if, right? They could pull this off if their language skills are elite, right? If they understand that they are in a very risky situation, but could lie their way through the German encounters, so to speak. Even the French sympathizers, right? The French Vichy, who clearly would sell out resistance and spies to the Germans for fear of retribution, right? The Germans were very, very harsh. If a French village held out a resistance soldier, so to speak, they might kill innocents to prove a point. For every German you kill, we kill villagers. So they need to understand the danger of what they're doing. They need to understand the moral dilemma they're in, right? But at the same time, I was going to put 3 of the PCs, because I was pre-making characters for this. One would be the agent coming in. That would kind of be the hero of the adventure, or the guy coming in to do a mission. Then a French resistance PC, and then the actual French citizens that owned the chateau that the Germans officers were bivouacked in. So I really was setting a pretty interesting, right, tone. But again, if they're not real familiar with how that works, and they're lukewarm on it, and I'd never want to force players to do something they don't want to do, right? So, but I want to try Savage Worlds. I want them to break the ice with Savage Worlds, so then we have options to use that in the future for different stuff, right? Okay. Like Task Force Raven, which would certainly be probably easier for them to grasp the idea of modern spec ops soldiers on missions where they may face wholly supernatural events or creatures, right? So, but thinking of how do I present this? What will I do with this? I don't want to start. I don't like info dumps in games. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary. Exposition is my least favorite narrative in film, and certainly in role playing, right? It can be done and done well in film, but moments of exposition, I generally like to, cover something that the audience and the character, it's relevant to the character situation, and the audience gets that information at the same time the characters do in the film, kind of thing. But exposition is a passive storytelling, which I'm not a big fan of. I like active, I like things to arise as they happen, for the most part. So you always have to have some, but then the other reason this comes up is the other night before we started our session of Those Dark Places, Dale had said, "Are you going to give an intro, kind of set all this up, the background, what's going on?" And I said, "No, I have zero intention on it." And I think they were all taken aback to some degree. And I said, "No, I'm gonna basically, I've given you guys session 0 documents. We have talked about it a little bit in Discord. You guys should know roughly what the science fiction is. I'm going to start it off with the ship arriving, where it's been sent, and we'll wake up the doctor, and we'll go from there." And it's kind of an in media res start, so to speak, without them literally starting in combat, or with an android with his hands around the throat of a character, right? You could start a session off, with one of them, quite literally, in duress. But the point is, I think it kind of surprised them and taken them aback. But because I'd already done the session 0, and the actual plays that I do, the table that I run, I don't care about spectators. I'm not concerned about people watching and listening. I'm concerned about my players and myself communicating and having a grand game. But because we record everything, because we are aware that we're putting this stuff out there in the public, you got to be cognizant of some things. But I don't actually treat our actual plays as if we are entertaining an audience, it's really about my players. It's about communicating properly and executing the game correctly. So anyway, I just want to talk about that because these are the things I dislike, right? I dislike character introduction. It's funny because that used to be something that would happen, I think, in almost all actual plays. We'll go around the table, tell us who you are, what character you're playing, and what are you about. I suppose, again, for viewers, that's relevant. But if the viewers really want to know, then they should hang in there and find out as the players find out, right, as we play. But and then, of course, info dumps, I think, are historically just horrible, right? If you want to put me to sleep, drop a 3-page introduction letter upon my head at the start of a session, bore me with a glut of data that half the time we're not going to retain, right? And they're not going to retain, right? So being aware of those things, I think, makes for a better, mystery anyway, right? Let them find out as they play. Let them take in what's important to them as they arise. Are you writing down the name of that NPC because it's important to you, or are you just shrugging your shoulders because, well, that's this NPC's, I'll never talk to this NPC again, or I'm not really concerned about it, right? It's like bumping into the teller at Walmart. You don't always get the name of the, I mean, you can look at his badge, his name badge, and say, oh, this guy's name's Brian, but you're not necessarily introducing yourself to every person you meet on the street. You're not getting their name. You're not, you just that's just happened to be somebody you bump into, the bartender, right? At whatever Applebee's restaurant. They're a face in a crowd to take your order, right, and deliver your drink. You're not paying any attention to what his name is. You don't care what his name is, right? Dude, give me a Bud Light, and you wait there until he hands you your Bud Light, and you're off, right? So it always cracks me up that we feel like we have to name everybody in our games, right? We feel like we have to name the bartender, we have to name the waitress. She's just a wench, waits tables, right? She'll go by whatever you call her for the most part, right? So, but anyway, it's fun, right? It's fun to contemplate these things, and I tend to, as I'm working on something or as I'm developing, what I'm going to do next, I'm thinking about these things because it is important to me, and so I very often then want to share these thoughts, with my peers, my colleagues, my brethren out there. So everybody have a great week. Joth, Wednesday night, Todd, we're going to get back into that world. I think we are playing with our main crew, which is going to be A-Rig, Trotter, Lauren, and Bomrick, hopefully. That will be very cool if we can get all of us. We are dealing with a pretty serious, this is probably our most tenured group of characters, right? We've all survived a while. We're all above level 2 for the most part. I think we're all at least level 2 or more. And we've got a ongoing dilemma of this cursed creature trying to kill basically A-Rig and Trotter for the most part, as they are involved in the desecration of its crypt. And at some point, we've got to defeat it, face it down, because escaping it is going to be difficult to do. And so we'll see. But there may be a final, there may be a closure to this particular problem in the next session, depending on how that goes. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.